cold winter night. The sky was crisp. The stars were so bright. I liked looking at them because it was the closest I felt like I could get to outer space, pretending I was looking out the window of a spaceship. As you look around the sky, especially as you get away from bright city lights, you can see lots of stars. In ancient times, as people spent a lot of time looking up at the night sky, they realized they could use their imagination to connect some of the brightest stars, like this, to form shapes or patterns. You've probably heard of this before. We call these imaginary shapes constellations. Often people would use these constellations to tell stories by the campfire. A few of these constellations might even be familiar to you, like this one here is Orion, the hunter. See how it looks like a man with a bow and arrow? Here's another constellation you might know. It's the Big Dipper, which is actually part of a bigger constellation called Ursa Major, or Big Bear, because some ancient people had a special story about a bear with a long tail. Do you see it? Here's the nose and the long tail. Constellations used to be a tool for storytelling, but today they're a convenient way to map the sky, and so anyone who studies space learns to identify them, especially scientists and astronauts. The constellation I was looking at that one winter night was Orion, a name originally given to it by the ancient Greeks. My dad had a pair of binoculars, and I learned there are some cool things to see in and around Orion by pointing my binoculars in the right spot. Like if you point binoculars or a telescope right here, you get to see this. It's a cloud in outer space that's been floating there for as long as we know. We call it the Orion Nebula. And if you look up here, do you see there? You get to see the Pleiades, or Seven Sisters. You can see a cluster of stars there, all next to each other. Now, to the eye alone, you might say there are only 6 or 7. You should go outside and try to count how many you can see. But when you get binoculars on it, now there are almost too many to count, and they sparkle as if opening a box of jewelry. So I got hooked, coming outside every night, looking at the stars, looking at all these things in binoculars. Orion became my favorite constellation to look at. A few months later, I went outside again, and Orion wasn't there. It was totally gone. Had it gone forever? Where did it go? I was looking in the same place. The stars of Orion seemed to have disappeared, and now there were these stars there instead. I learned that these stars were a different constellation, Leo, which the ancient Greeks thought looked a bit like a lion that was lying down. Over time, I figured out something I hadn't known before. Orion didn't actually vanish. It's just that Orion is only visible in winter. By springtime, it had slowly sank below the horizon, and for some reason, Leo came out instead. It turns out that each season we see different constellations. In other words, the constellations are seasonal. Orion is a winter constellation, and Leo is a spring constellation. What other constellations are there? Well, let's go on a quick tour of the night sky and see if you can find some of them. Your teacher will hand out a constellation guide to you now.